Anna, you had to make this big presentation.
Yeah.
Tell me what it was all about.
Well, the issue was that our profession hadn't had a conference for 7 years because of various problems, and this was the first time that all of us would be getting together. In fact, half the profession was going to be getting together, 300 of us, and I was offered the opportunity to do the opening keynote.
Okay, and how long were you meant to talk for?
Initially, I was meant to talk for an hour. And I managed to get them down to 45.
Sure. And in terms of where you are in your life and the career, was this sort of quite a big deal?
Well, I'd never done a keynote before. I mean, for me, it was a career-defining moment. I'm even nervous talking about it.
Why? I mean, why was it career-defining?
Well, it was an opportunity for me to say something to my colleagues.
Okay.
And I'm used to presenting to other professional groups, but I had always, I think, slightly shied away from presenting to my colleagues.
Sure.
Because I think of the challenging nature of the stuff I wanted to say.
Okay. And how much notice did you have to prepare for it?
I had absolutely loads of notice. I had maybe 6 months notice.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah.
And how did you use the time? And
I did a heck of a lot of preparation. I mean, I researched the profession. I'd been away on maternity leave for a couple of years, so I didn't feel steeped in the profession. So I spent a lot of time researching the history and updating myself really on what was going on.
So what did you prepare?
I prepared a really convoluted talk using Prezi. With sort of feeding in lots of different things from the external environment, what was going on now. I'd watched lots of TED Talks and really wanted to see where everyone was headed, the sort of wider context, the internal context, what was going on within the profession. And I really wanted to, sew everything together, because I thought, gosh, 45 minutes, I need to say masses of really interesting new stuff.
Sure.
In fact, a lot of people said PowerPoint is out, use Keynote or use Prezi.
Okay.
So I learnt Prezi, which was great fun, but resulted in quite an interesting, overly complex sort of first draft, I suppose.
So you had this major presentation coming up.
Yeah.
And then what happened? How did we meet?
Well, I just came across an email from Govno, a presentation skills course, and I sort of just investigated a bit further. I didn't think I needed presentation skills training, but I did know I needed something, and I checked out, there was a little CV of you attached to the email, and I checked it out, and I thought, this guy's worked in the Balkans, conflict resolution. I thought maybe he might be able to help me.
So you came on the course, and what happened?
I was very reassured that there was lots of prep, and I think you sent about 5 emails before saying, prepare 5 minutes on one of these 3 topics. And I was really reassured by that. And I saw that the outline of the course was simple. There was not much feeding of information. There was lots of practice, and there was lots of beginning chunk of information end, present practice and lots of active examples obviously being used.
So when into the course did you realise the Prezi approach might not work?
Well, pretty much straight away. Actually, it wasn't just the Prezi approach, it was the whole approach. I mean, for a start, I was so nervous that I didn't sleep the night before the course, where I had to give a 5-minute talk. So you can imagine. And then I pitched up, and actually, the first thing I said to you, I think, was, I'm massively undiplomatic, and I've got to say this really difficult thing. And he said, that's all right. Well, you just start by saying, I'm massively undiplomatic. Would you like me to be my usual self, or should I be diplomatic? You said, just make a joke out of it, and you made a joke out of it. And I thought, oh, what a relief. And I thought, oh my goodness, maybe I can actually do this lightly. Maybe it's possible to do a really difficult conversation with fun. And actually, the number one thing I think I took from the course was, you have to give them a good time. It's a show. It really sat more comfortably with me than...
Yeah, because I think one of the things
really
we talked about on the course was getting the tone right, but the tone is made up of a lot of details. And I think I had the impression, if I can say so, that was something you hadn't really thought about beforehand very much. You'd focused on you, but you'd focused a bit less on the occasion.
I'd focused on like a researchy presentation where you have your facts and you support them by your evidence, and that's what and you make your point supported by the evidence, and as long as the evidence is strong, your point is hit home. But this isn't the sort of, there isn't a fact there that I needed to convey, a new bit of research. It's an opinion, and that required totally different skill set.
So then you basically, after the few days you had left, after you'd had months to prepare, you threw away the Prezi.
I threw away the Prezi.
And you went for a PowerPoint type presentation.
I went for straightforward. But actually, one thing about tone, while we were on that subject, was that you communicated your message about the tone experientially. Because you were firing kind of bullets at people. You were saying challenging things to almost everybody, because obviously there's a lot of interaction, and people had to go and do sort of their 5-minute presentations, and you would be absolutely uncompromising in your feedback, which was so sort of it was such a relief to me that you were attentive to detail, uncompromisingly attentive to detail, because I knew that was what was going to make the difference for me. But also how you criticised them was the essence of the talk, really, because I wanted to say something critical to my profession, and you were saying critical things, but with humour, with lightness, with good intention, I think, and that came across. And so people just immediately took it on, and you could see that from the beginning of the day they had completely absorbed what you'd said very critically of them at the beginning of the day, so that by the end of the day they did their presentations again completely differently. So I think that whole
you could see
tone
the result,
thing,
can't you? You can see the result.
It was extraordinary. But I think the tone thing was how it came across. So I had you in mind, not just what you said to me, but how you did it.
Sure. So can you think of one or two things you picked up on the course which sort of practically made a difference on the day, but were things you hadn't thought about in advance previously?
Yeah. So the number one thing I hadn't thought about at all was the size of the audience. For me, it didn't really matter that there were 300 people. It wasn't the number of the people, it was who I was talking to. But actually, you just said, look, 300 people, the more people you're talking to, the simpler you have to be, and the clearer your slides have to be. And that you basically said, something very obvious, but that I hadn't thought of, which was that they literally won't be able to see the slides at the back. And this required me to basically excise pretty much all the writing. I'd had lots of really beautifully complex little Prezi kind of combo photoshopped stuff with photo and labels everywhere, and the labels dropping off to indicate something, and it was just far, far too messy. I just looked at it now and I could hear your voice saying, this is a total mess. And actually on the same conference, many people were presenting, in the same hall, and I was at the back for a couple of presentations and just heard your voice, because I couldn't read what was on the slide. And it really, I think the funniest thing you probably said to me in the sort of follow-ups that we did on the phone, you said, you don't want anyone to have as a first thought when they look at your slide, that face, what's that? Your sort of the sort of maxim, one of the mantras was, you don't, it's not what you say. That's what you said. It's not what you say, and the whole group said, it's how you say it. And you said, no, it's what they hear. And that is the number one take-home point, I think. Yeah. But you can't understand that until you get all the other bits of detail around that, I think. I mean, how you get them to hear what you want them to hear is a completely different ball game. Okay. And some of that is what you put on the screen.
Sure, okay. So you basically simplified it down, did you? And did you...
Not only with the pictures, but also with the words. So you really taught me about chopping up my sentences and making sure... I mean, I sent you a rough draft, didn't I? I thought it was my final draft. And you sent it back. And you hadn't actually taken out that much. You just took out the key bits that made it messy, unclear. You took out the apologetic tone. You took out the sort of overcomplicated sort of evidencing of my points, so that it was very clear. This is what I want to say. I'm not going to sort of faff around the edges. So there was something about, and you said, the bigger your audience, the simpler you have to be.
Sure. And you sent the first draft PowerPoint version you sent was quite arty. What was all that about?
Well, I'd taken on board your idea that it has to be pictures. I had a picture for every point. It was brilliant pictures, and they were all black and white because I thought it'd be nicer, and they did look very beautiful. But you responded saying, "I just don't get it. I don't understand this. You need something better." I mean, the hairdresser, because I was telling a story of when I was in a hairdresser, and you said, just put up a picture of a hairdresser. So I found an arty shot of a flower in a hairdresser's and you just said, I can't tell this is a hairdresser, and your whole audience will be looking, thinking, what is that? And sent back a much sassier picture of a load of 60s sort of women with huge platform shoes under sort of dryers. And actually it got a great laugh, because I would have thought that something like that on a screen behind me when I'm trying to make a serious point would detract from the serious point. But I tell you, I think people remember that picture more than anything.
And what about the shark?
The shark. Oh, the shark. So basically, I was trying to say that there was something going on, that there were sort of internal squabbles going on, and it would be nice for us to be able to mend our splits and work together. And so you decided that, and I can remember it on the bit of paper that you sent me back, saying, insert picture of shark fin here. And your line was something like, but we all know that underneath the surface, something is lurking, etc., etc. And actually, that really was a clever way of getting everybody alongside in a light way to look at the serious problems.
Mm. One of the nice things you said, or the interesting things you said afterwards, was that you could hear the audience listening to you.
Well, one of the things
that.
One of the again big take-home points was it's a conversation. You kept saying it's a conversation. You're not talking one way. It's a conversation, and actually, I totally took that on board. I asked questions. And I could sense the response. I could really sense the feel of the room right the way to the end. That's the other thing, is that for the first time, I felt like I was doing a talk which didn't have a sort of, in Greek you say that the talk has a tummy in the middle of it. It didn't have a tummy. It didn't have that lull in the middle of it where everyone just goes,
boring stuff, yeah.
And then, at the end, it didn't, I could swear to you, I really felt that everybody was there with me for the whole of these 45 minutes.
What about the singing dog?
Great. Do I have to reveal?
I think no YouTube video is complete without a singing dog. Let's be honest here.
So basically, it took me a lot of time to believe that a singing dog would actually help my presentation. This was a weighty, I was talking to my profession. I wanted to come across as a serious person who was, experienced and sort of had something to offer. And you suggested that I start my presentation with a singing dog. It wasn't even a singing dog. It was a dog next to a baby who was crying, and the dog basically managed to attune to the baby's cries and stop the baby crying. And it was an extraordinary video, but it was very silly.
So on the whole, and how did it all go down? I mean, you were a big hit, I gather.
Well, the bottom line is that I got a huge long clap. I could hear that everybody was engaged all the way through. Loads of people have come up to me afterwards and said, that really needed saying. I'm so pleased you'd said that. This has been going on for years. And I've had also kind of people asking me for help with different bits and pieces. I'm sure some people were challenged by it, and I got a sort of challenge from within the profession, sure. Which I expect. Actually, I took it as a compliment because sure. It meant my point had kind of hit home. To me, presentation skills training meant superficial communication skills, and I thought it was going to be quite boring, and I thought it was going to be quite superficial. But the one thing that I really noticed and that helped me massively was that you listened and you took on board the issues for my profession, my tiny profession that I didn't assume anyone would care about. And because you actually paid attention to the issue, not just the presentation, but the issue, then I was able to link your comments, which were critical and difficult to take on board, with what I needed to do.
Well, I think
I think you really did listen and help me.
Well, I think that the problem with a lot of this public speaking, presentation skills stuff is they don't really. You've got to start off with good content. You've got to start off with, if you've got a tough message, that's good content. So the question is then, how do we then work with that? Yeah. But there's no point in having great presentation skills and no content.
Yes.
It just ultimately is wasting people's time. People can hear that there's nothing there.
Yes.
It's slick.
Exactly.
It's PR, spin, whatever, but there's nothing there.
And I think the problem with that is people come away feeling good, and then 5 minutes later they think, pointless.
Exactly.
Yeah.
No, so what people have taken away from your experience, I think, from what you're saying is, they were quite touched, and they were also given something to think about.
Yes.
And that it's a keynote for a conference. Yes. They've spent the next 2 or 3 days talking about these issues.
But also you said to me, because you also engaged on the level of content, and you said, look, you're saying to them to do this, but you're not telling them how. That's a bit of an empty message. I mean, that's easy enough. Anyone could say, do this, but how? You've got to tell me the steps. And you said, what about these steps? So you engage with the content as well, which I think it's an extra level. It's an extra level of diplomacy. It's an extra level of engaging with the content. It's a very worthwhile whole package. And I have to say that really, I think maybe what I haven't really sort of put across here enough was that this was a potentially devastating moment for me professionally. My profession kind of is everything to me, and I'd been so anxious about it for about 3 months, to the extent that I wasn't eating properly because I was frightened of alienating, my whole profession because of my lack of skill in the area of communication and diplomacy. But I had such deep integrity that I really wanted to say this one thing and not just, I could have just, gone round the issue and talked about something else. Exactly, and I would have just said something boring, but safe.
Sure.
But this enabled me to say something that was difficult and interesting and move that I think genuinely, from what I hear, the profession could possibly take it on, is likely possibly even to take it on and move forward.
Yeah, but you've become a leader.
It's certainly given me much more confidence in what I think I can do. Yeah.
Thank you.